Alright everyone, listen up. The summer camp rules are as follows. Camp Rule 1, do not attempt to leave the school by any means, or the penalty is loss of limbs. Camp Rule 2, no eating or sleeping outside of rest periods, or the penalty is death. Camp Rule 3, clean plate club is in effect. No leftovers. Final rule, I am among you. A few days after the SATs, I received a graduate summer camp invitation mailed from the school. I turned the invitation over and over in my hands. The black invitation had a metallic sheen to it, looking very mysterious. I was puzzled. I'd never heard of previous graduating classes having a summer camp. And it was at the school? We'd already spent 3 years there. What else could there be to do? Honestly, I'd rather stay home and play video games than see those boring high school classmates again. But the invitation clearly stated that only those who completed the summer camp activities would get their diplomas. Looks like I had no choice but to go. First day of summer camp. Probably because of the threat of not getting our diplomas, all 35 students from our class showed up on time. When I walked into the classroom, everyone was chattering. Our school's really stepping up, huh? A summer camp. Yeah, I wonder if it's gonna cost us. Are you an idiot? What could you possibly spend money on staying at school for a week? The classroom was noisy. So noisy that none of us noticed the projector had turned on by itself. Red text was projected onto the blackboard. Bright red, like fresh bloodstains. Terrifying. Welcome, everyone, to this year's graduate summer camp. A creepy, robotic female voice suddenly rang out, reading the red words projected on the board. The previously rowdy classroom instantly fell silent. Only the dry, electronic voice continued, sentence by sentence, reading the words on the board. It was incredibly eerie. This summer camp will last for 5 days, with a total of 36 participants. The goal of this summer camp is to complete all tasks, to survive. Now, let's begin our pleasant summer camp journey. First task, run to the athletic field within 10 minutes. After reading the last sentence projected on the board, the electronic voice went silent. I stared blankly at the blood-red words, an involuntary shiver running down my spine. The students, finally snapping out of it, erupted. What the hell is this? Some kind of twisted game? Who the hell is behind this prank? Show yourself. That was Jessica, the class queen bee. You guys don't actually believe this, do you? This was Ashley, Jessica's right-hand girl. While the others were heatedly discussing, I quietly counted everyone. I was right. There were clearly only 35 of us in the class. How could there be 36 participants? Soon, others noticed this discrepancy too. Ashley smugly yelled at a few students who were about to head to the field. You idiots, this prankster doesn't even know how many students are in our class, and you still believe them? But I felt the opposite. If, as Ashley said, this was just a prank, then the mastermind went to a lot of trouble to gather all of us at the school. They must know us inside and out. How could they not know our class only had 35 people? Then I thought about the projector playing on its own, without anyone operating it. The eerie electronic voice from an unknown source. And this summer camp, whose goal was survival. Better safe than sorry. Figuring this out, I ignored Ashley's rambling and immediately headed for the field. When I reached the field, there was only 1 minute left. I looked back and saw Jessica and Ashley sprinting desperately towards the field. If you knew this was coming, why act all high and mighty earlier? I chuckled to myself. The sinister electronic voice blared from the field's PA system, starting a countdown. 10, 9, 8. Jessica panicked. She shoved Ashley, who was clinging to her, and managed to dash across the edge of the field just before the countdown ended. Ashley wasn't so lucky. It looked like she got a leg cramp. Pushed by Jessica, she stumbled and sat right on the ground. Ashley gave up. "You idiots, I swear, you're all going to die of stupidity." She never finished her sentence. Because the countdown ended. Then, out of nowhere, a pack of wild dogs appeared. Howling madly, they chased Ashley, tearing at her ferociously. Ashley was terrified. She ran, cried, and cursed wildly. Eventually, she was torn to shreds. A bloody, mangled mess. Her blood splattered onto the faces and clothes of nearby students. The girls screamed in terror. And Jessica, who was closest, stared blankly at the scene. With a thud, she collapsed to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. I wondered if she was crying because her push had indirectly killed Ashley, or because she herself had been a hair's breadth away from death. My dear students, you've done very well. Now, let's move on to the second task. The electronic voice sounded again, giving us no time to catch our breath. Second task, physical training. Run 5 kilometers in 30 minutes. The timer starts now. Having just witnessed Ashley's gruesome death, no one dared to resist this time. The moment the electronic voice finished, everyone started running like mad. 5 kilometers in half an hour was nothing for most of the guys. But for the girls, it wasn't so easy. Gradually, the girls started to run out of steam. Jessica, lagging at the back, cried out to the students ahead of her, "Please, help me." Unfortunately, no one responded. Everyone was too busy trying to save themselves. Who had the energy to cater to the former queen bee? Somehow, this scene felt familiar. It was just that before, Jessica had been playing a different role. Maybe this was just karma. My stamina had always been good, and I finished the run 5 minutes early. The countdown ended. Once again, I watched my classmates die before my eyes. A few girls who hadn't finished suddenly started gasping for air, as if they couldn't breathe. Finally, their faces turned deathly pale, their eyes vacant, and they collapsed onto the field, never to get up again. The sinister, terrifying electronic voice spoke again. "My dear students, you've completed today's tasks very well. As a reward, I'll give you a clue this afternoon. For now, let's rest. See you in the cafeteria in half an hour, hee hee hee." Learning there would be no more tasks this morning, the students dispersed. I replayed everything that had just happened, unable to tell if I was dreaming or awake. Wait, a thought suddenly struck me. If this was a graduate summer camp, why were there no students from other graduating classes in the school at all? This was a conspiracy targeting our class. This was murder. I had to get out of this damn place. Otherwise, I would definitely die too. I started running as if my life depended on it. After running for a long time, I finally saw the school gate. My heart leaped with joy. Wait, isn't that Brandon and Sarah up ahead? The class president and the student council rep, also the most dazzling couple in our class. I watched them walk out of the school gate hand in hand, and I was about to follow. The next second, they actually turned around and walked back, still hand in hand. What the hell? I was both scared and confused. I quickened my pace, wanting to see what was going on. As I got closer, I saw their expressions were twisted, their limbs stiff, as if they had lost control of their own bodies. They struggled constantly, clearly not returning to this hellhole willingly. Hee hee hee. The electronic voice seemed to be everywhere. Students, someone actually tried to escape. It seems it's time to set some rules for you. Camp Rule 1, do not attempt to leave the school by any means, or the penalty is loss of limbs. Camp Rule 2, no eating or sleeping outside of rest periods, or the penalty is death. Camp Rule 3, to be determined, hee hee hee. The electronic voice's cold laughter made my blood run cold. And Brandon and Sarah suddenly started attacking each other. I watched as Sarah's arm was broken, yet she seemed to feel no pain and continued to beat Brandon. They were like mortal enemies, a far cry from their once sweet relationship. As they fought, they suddenly noticed me. With their twisted faces and missing limbs, they hopped and lurched towards me. I turned and ran. Damn it, this was too freaking bizarre. I ran all the way to the classroom door in one breath. Only to find that Brandon and Sarah, whom I had left far behind, had somehow arrived at the classroom before me. They were discussing something with a few other students. How was that possible? Was what I saw earlier just a hallucination? But their limbs were definitely gone. That proved everything I saw was real. Cold sweat dripped down my back. Even weirder, these students didn't seem at all afraid of the limbless, grotesquely twitching Brandon and Sarah. I couldn't believe that even at a time like this, the class president and student council rep were still as influential as ever. Suppressing my fear, I tried to get closer to hear what they were discussing. I only caught a few irrelevant words like creepy and scary. Then they noticed me and stopped talking, looking at me with suspicion and hostility. Especially Brandon. He snarled at me viciously. Not at all like his usual polite, two-faced scumbag self. I guess this summer camp helped him shed his disguise and be himself. These student officers were really something. Even at the end of the world, they were still forming cliques. I couldn't be bothered to argue with them. I'd better sort out the clues myself. Question 1. There are only 35 people in the class, but 36 participants. Could someone have been hiding beforehand? Or could they be the mastermind? I had no idea. I racked my brain but couldn't figure it out, so I just shook my head helplessly. Question 2. After this morning, it's obvious the mastermind's goal is to kill us all, or rather, to torture us to death. But why would they do this? How did our class offend them? Could it be one of the students in our class? That doesn't make sense. I pondered for a long time but couldn't reach any reliable conclusions. The PA system overhead suddenly crackled. Students, come to the cafeteria for lunch, hee hee. The eerie electronic voice let out a laugh. The laughter lingered, chilling me to the bone. Camp Rule 3, Clean Plate Club is in effect. No leftovers. When I got to the cafeteria, most of the other students were already there. The food was pre-portioned and placed on the tables. We couldn't choose. I randomly found a seat. Actually, I had already guessed the food wouldn't be anything normal. But the few strands of blonde hair in my bowl still made me sick. I remembered Jessica proudly showing off her newly dyed hair this morning. Ugh, I fought back nausea, closed my eyes, and frantically stuffed the contents of the bowl into my mouth, forcing my taste buds not to work. Ah! A girl screamed. Bang! It was Laura, our class rep for student life, who had thrown her bowl. A bloody eyeball rolled out of the bowl on the floor, spinning. It was incredibly gory. Many students who glanced at it threw up, and even I felt a wave of nausea. No wonder Laura couldn't take it. I'd rather die than eat this. Laura cried. Fine, then go die. The omnipresent electronic voice replied coldly. Immediately after, Laura's hands clamped around her own neck. Her face went from flushed to pale, then from pale to purple. She shook her head frantically, trying to break free. But her hands, as if out of control, squeezed her neck tightly. Laura choked herself to death. I sighed. I didn't pity her, I just found it ironic. Laura, the class rep for student life, used to force students to finish their food to complete the Clean Plate Club for her own glory. She probably never imagined this would be her end. Seeing Laura's gruesome death, the other students didn't dare to be picky anymore. Gagging, they began to eat ravenously. And so, they divided up the bodies of the students who had died that morning. After lunch, everyone unanimously went to the bathroom to vomit. The surviving students had just returned to the classroom when the electronic voice sounded. Students, you've completed your tasks very well. As a reward, the clue is, I am among you. This afternoon, let's play a game of Guess Who I Am. Third task, write the name of the student you suspect on the A4 paper on your desk. You have 2 minutes. 28 participants remaining. The task begins now. As soon as the voice finished, a sheet of A4 paper appeared on each student's desk. I looked around. The students were eyeing each other, whispering, and occasionally writing something down. But I don't know why. I still felt like this mastermind was toying with us. Were they really in this classroom? I replayed all of today's events in my mind. Ashley died from being too clever for her own good. Jessica died from forced exercise. Brandon and Sarah disabled by the camp rules. Laura died by the clean plate club rule. Then I thought about their personalities. Ashley, full of bad ideas, always scheming with Jessica to bully classmates and pick on the weak. Jessica once forced a girl who had offended her to run laps in the scorching summer heat. The girl fainted from heatstroke and got a concussion from the fall. Brandon and Sarah, always flaunting their student officer status, making up all sorts of rules, and berating classmates at will. Laura, to win the Best Officer award, forced a student with a stomach bug to eat spicy chicken from the cafeteria, landing that student in the hospital for a week. Could this really be a coincidence? No matter how I thought about it, it felt like they got what they deserved. The electronic voice suddenly started a countdown. 10, 9, 5, 4, 3, 2, oh crap. I hadn't written anything. Since Autumn is unwilling to participate in this task, then come help count the votes. That was it? As I collected the A4 papers, I wondered why I'd been spared. Many students shot hateful glares at me. I felt like I was sitting on pins and needles, but then it suddenly dawned on me. This mastermind was clearly trying to paint a target on my back. If there was a next round to this game, these students would probably write my name without a second thought. Damn it. Greg, 1 vote. Sarah, 1 vote. Greg, 2 votes. Greg, 19 votes. The most. This Greg was probably the most hated person in class, aside from Jessica. A rich kid, he often mocked students from poorer families, relying on his wealth and connections. Because his dad had donated a building to the school, he also became a student officer, abusing his power. He even did outrageous things like making underprivileged students bark like dogs to decide if they got financial aid spots. So when everyone was clueless about the mastermind, he was naturally the first one to be voted out. Greg was furious, cursing loudly, "Which idiot voted for me? Do I look like someone who'd do something this boring?" The electronic voice chuckled eerily. "Students, you guessed wrong. As a punishment, the student with the most nominations will swallow gold and die." Greg screamed in terror, "No, don't kill me. My dad's rich, I'll give you whatever you want." As he spoke, he took off a gold chain from his neck and swallowed it. Then, he writhed on the floor in pain. Perhaps the pain was unbearable. Greg scrambled up, ran to the window, and jumped. After Greg died, the electronic voice remained silent for the entire night. Maybe the mastermind was tired. Or maybe they had achieved their goal. At this moment, the students in the class had completely lost trust and hope. They were like jumpy as hell, suspicious of everything and everyone. Second day of summer camp. In the morning, I counted the students in the classroom again. Only 24 were left. Even though the electronic voice hadn't spoken since last night, the number of living students was still decreasing. This was all because yesterday, the mastermind had planted seeds of suspicion in the students' minds. They started killing each other. The ones who died now were mostly students who were usually loners in class. Following this logic, they'd probably come after me soon. I looked around. Watching those whispering cliques, they suddenly felt so unfamiliar. But then again, when had I ever felt they were familiar? Students, your task today is to find me. The creepy electronic voice began to speak. If you guess where I am, remember to quickly share it with your companions. I'll give you a big reward. As soon as the voice finished, the students in the classroom anxiously started pointing fingers at each other. I left the classroom alone. Unlike those foolish kids who were being easily manipulated, I believed the most important thing now wasn't to find the mastermind, but to avoid being mistaken for the mastermind. After yesterday's events, the students already hated this mastermind to the core. Fear and anger had long since robbed them of their sanity. If I were suspected of being the mastermind now, the crazed students would surely do anything. Besides, the electronic voice only said there was a reward for finding them, not a punishment for failing. I might as well take advantage of the quiet and go back to the dorm to rest. I locked the dorm room door and lay on the bed, replaying the bizarre events of the past 2 days. Without realizing it, I fell asleep. I had a very long dream. In my dream, I had a very, very good friend named Summer. She was kind and lovely. Her parents were always busy with work and had no time for her. They only cared about her grades, not her well-being. She gradually became very lonely and quiet. Even when she was wronged at school, she would just quietly digest it and never tell her parents. Perhaps because of her withdrawn personality, she was often bullied in high school. Jessica bullied her, not letting her eat on hot summer days and forcing her to run 10 laps around the field. Ashley schemed against her, throwing her homework in the trash and pouring red ink on her seat. Laura intimidated her, forcing her to eat spicy chicken when she had a stomach bug. Summer wanted to voice her grievances countless times, but her parents were just too busy. Several times, just as she started to speak, a phone call would pull them away. So she became disappointed, even more silent, and more tolerant. Middle and high school kids are like that. They bully the weak and fear the strong. The more Summer endured, the more she was bullied. As her good friend, I always wanted to help her, but apart from comforting her, I couldn't do anything. But Summer was always very strong. She would always say, "Thank you, Autumn. Your comfort makes me feel so much better." I thought that as long as we endured until high school graduation, we would never have to face these things again. I thought that with my companionship, Summer would definitely be able to persevere. I thought our promise of one like Summer, one like Autumn would last forever. But then that dark afternoon came. That day after school, Greg and a few other boys cornered her in the bathroom. I woke up on the 3rd day of summer camp. I had slept through the entire previous day and had no idea what had happened. There were even fewer students in the class than yesterday. Now, only 15 people remained. Some students had died from mental breakdowns, taking their own lives. But more had died at the hands of others. They kept suspecting, kept killing each other. What a bunch of fools. Yesterday's dream gave me a vague suspicion. But I didn't dare to think in that direction. Because she had been gone for too long. So long that only a few people in this class even remembered her. I was one of them. Another was Brandon. The once high and mighty class president was now humbly begging me, "Autumn, you must know, don't you?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied coldly. "Summer, the mastermind must be her. You were best friends, how could you not know where she is?" Brandon said urgently. "Yes, we were best friends. And I do know where she is. Don't you know? Summer is dead. She's already dead." As I spoke, a tear uncontrollably rolled down my cheek. Brandon stared at me blankly. He muttered, "She's dead, she's dead. We're all doomed now," and left. Watching his retreating figure, I understood his fear and also felt deeply that he deserved it. He was the one who took the latest smartphone Greg gave him and then persuaded Summer not to report it to the police. Today was only the 3rd day of summer camp. Given the current situation, I really doubted it would even take 5 days for everyone in class 3-1 to die. At noon, Brandon hung himself alone in the classroom. The scene was so bizarre. Without limbs, he couldn't possibly have hung himself. But judging from the startled reactions of the other students, it really didn't look like he was murdered. "Look at the blackboard," Sarah cried. "Summer, I'm sorry. That's the class president's handwriting," someone shouted. Summer's back." The classroom erupted into wails and screams. Yes. Of course, they were afraid. Because everyone in this class had, to some extent, bullied Summer. High school bullying is like that. If you don't want to be the one bullied, you'd better join the bullies and bully others. Poor Summer was the one bullied by the entire class. "Are you all very afraid of me?" A familiar voice. Tears suddenly streamed down my face. It really was her. Summer hadn't changed much. Still so sweet, so gentle. But the Summer of today was vastly different from before. While I was crying tears of joy, the other students were already scared out of their wits. They frantically apologized to Summer, some even kneeling and kowtowing. Summer giggled. "Classmates, since you all feel guilty towards me, how about you play a game with me? Write down the name of the classmate you hate the most on a piece of paper. The classmate with the most nominations will disappear from this world forever. How about that?" It seemed Summer still hadn't let go. I sighed softly. Who could blame her, when in the past, the victim of such games was always her? Sarah timidly asked, "Can we write anyone?" Summer smiled again and replied, "Of course, anyone present." "Let's begin now." I looked around. The few remaining students were whispering amongst themselves. Summer walked over to me and said with a smile, "Autumn, who do you think they'll write?" "I think." Before I could finish my sentence, 2 boys suddenly rushed over, punching and kicking Summer, cursing, "You bitch, think you're so tough." But the next second, Summer took them down with a roundhouse kick and a front kick. 1 kick each sent them flying out the window. My heart skipped a beat. Summer really wasn't the same person anymore. No longer weak, but capable of protecting herself. With the example of those 2 boys, no other student dared to resist. They started writing furiously. "Autumn, why don't you count the votes again?" Summer said with a smile. I couldn't find a reason to refuse. "Autumn, 1 vote. Autumn, 2 votes. Autumn, 3 votes. Autumn, 6 votes." I looked at Summer nervously. Summer was also looking at me. Just as I was feeling uneasy, she burst out laughing. "Autumn, your popularity is just like mine, not so great, huh?" I laughed too. This was good. Summer was no longer the Summer of old. But we were still one like Summer, one like Autumn. Summer waved her hand casually. The students who had voted for me started fighting each other. Their limbs were torn apart, flesh and blood flying everywhere. I wasn't scared by this. Just still a bit unaccustomed to it. It used to be me comforting the fragile Summer, but now she was protecting me. That night, Summer and I lay in the same bed, just like old times. She talked to me for a long, long time. About her childhood, about things we had said and done together. But she never mentioned what happened to her after that day, when she disappeared. She didn't bring it up, and I didn't dare to ask. "Autumn, do you think I did the right thing?" Summer suddenly stared at me, her eyes sparkling. For some reason, I felt a little scared. Before I could answer, Summer muttered to herself. "Of course, I did the right thing. Those classmates, they all deserved it. They got what was coming to them." I really wanted to ask her how she managed to use these supernatural abilities to punish the classmates who had bullied her. But for some reason, my mouth felt glued shut, and I couldn't say a word. I could only passively listen to Summer chattering on and on. Fourth day of summer camp. Summer looked at the remaining 5 students, besides me, with a grin. They were the 5 class officers, led by Sarah. I had to admit, class officers were smart. They knew how to stick together. Yesterday, when those 6 students voted for me, Sarah had accurately assessed the situation and led the other 4 to vote for another student. But that only bought them one more day. It couldn't change the final outcome. Actually, this group of class officers hadn't done anything terribly wrong. They had merely stood by and watched while Summer was bullied. They had just given cursory answers when teachers asked them about bullying in the class. Sarah cried and pleaded, "Summer, I just didn't notice. Please let me go, I beg you." Yeah, right. Standing by and watching was just not noticing. For some reason, I thought of that classic quote. When they came for one person, you did not speak out. When they came for another, you did not speak out. One day, the blade will fall on your own head. I hope Sarah and these class officers learn this lesson in their next lives. Fifth day of summer camp. Summer held my hand as we strolled over the ginkgo leaves on campus. It felt like we were back in the old days. Back then, she would share everything with me, no matter what happened. Autumn, you know, someone actually found me the day before yesterday. I don't know why, but hearing this topic, I had a bad feeling. Summer looked at me steadily, a strange smile on her face. You know, the day before yesterday, I was hiding in that bathroom, the one from that night. I started to break out in a cold sweat. I wished so much that Summer would stop talking. But Summer had no intention of letting me off the hook. I finally know who all the people were who violated me that night. And I finally know why they chose me. I began to tremble uncontrollably. Summer stared straight at me and finally asked the question. Autumn, why did you betray me? So, it was finally here? I felt a sense of relief, closed my eyes, and resigned myself to my fate. I'm sorry, Summer. I just wanted to stay in this world. Self-confession. Actually, I was never Summer's very, very good friend. I was Summer's second personality. Summer and I lived in the same body. I originally didn't exist in this world. Summer was bullied day after day for 3 whole years of high school. She finally had a mental breakdown. Her parents didn't listen to her, they only cared about her grades. Summer was too lonely, too desperate for a friend. She learned a method from somewhere to summon a second personality. So she started talking to herself. So she started writing down everything that happened each day in a diary. So she started imagining she had a good friend named Autumn. And so I appeared. At first, I only replied to Summer's entries in the diary. Comforting her, encouraging her, day after day. Just like that, Summer and I took turns using this body. She went to school during the day and wrote her thoughts in her diary. I appeared at night and replied to her entries, word by word. But Summer's condition worsened. Later, she could no longer even handle high school studies. But, always considerate of others, she still didn't want to disappoint her parents, who had such high hopes for her. So she begged me to go to school and take exams in her place. I had no reason to refuse. So gradually, Summer and I switched. I started going to school during the day, and she only came out at night to see the world. I was very different from Summer. Lacking love since childhood, she was fragile, sensitive, liked to think of others, and was easily hurt. I, on the other hand, was created to compensate for her flaws. I was cold, ruthless, a true egoist. When Jessica threw my school bag into the toilet, I would pick it up without expression and, by the way, toss her uniform in. When Laura tried to force me to eat food I didn't like, would dump it directly and then push her chattering self away. When other classmates called Summer by nicknames and threw trash at my desk, I would continue to work on my science exam papers, unfazed. Gradually, Summer trusted me more and never asked to go to school herself again. I also became better and better at imitating her, becoming indistinguishable from Summer, even to her parents. This kind of life wasn't bad. But Summer's parents should never, ever have found the diary we wrote together. They finally began to suspect that their daughter had mental problems. They discussed taking Summer, which was now me, to see a psychologist. They said they wanted to make me, this second personality, disappear forever. Unfortunately, I overheard their plan word for word when I came home from school. Summer was a good girl. But I felt it was unfair to me. Did I deserve to be summoned and dismissed at will? Besides, if it weren't for me, Summer wouldn't have lasted this long. How could she have lived healthily until now? I finally developed murderous intent toward Summer, this good friend ingrained in my DNA. I wanted to replace her. I wanted to stay in this world. Only if Summer, the primary personality, disappeared, could I completely take her place. So I decided to completely destroy her, to make her disappear from this world. So, when I accidentally overheard Greg and a few boys talking lewdly about the girls in class, I pretended to casually walk past them, casually flicking my long hair. Sure enough, these scumbags targeted me. They started following me home from school every night. But I always pretended to be on the phone with my family, so they never made a move. Until that day, I said to Summer, I want to rest today. Can you go to school by yourself? Summer listened calmly as I finished my story. Autumn, you're so foolish. I never intended to keep fighting you for this body. I widened my eyes, then shook my head. Your parents didn't think so. Summer laughed sadly. If they truly cared about me, how would you have had the chance to harm me? I seemed to suddenly understand, yet I was still a bit confused. Summer laughed drily. That morning, that damned morning, I heard them say that your grades were much better than mine, and they would decide after the SATs who would stay and who would go. My heart jolted. So that's how it was. It wasn't that they were too busy to take their daughter to see a doctor. They were shrewdly calculating how to have a more perfect daughter. Summer, so pitiful. She had never been truly loved by anyone. My lips trembled, but I still couldn't bring myself to say the 3 words I am sorry. I always thought I was the person who understood her best in the world. I always thought I had done her a great service. I always thought she owed me a lot. In the end, it turned out I was the one who hurt her the most. Summer seemed to understand my guilt and smiled indifferently. Actually, you don't need to apologize. If it weren't for you, I would have been much worse off. I shook my head, wanting to tell her, no, that's not it, I know what a wonderful girl you are. But she didn't let me say it. Autumn, I have to leave. I hope you can live on in my place. You have to live very, very well. 13 Reality. No. The girl's hands flailed, her legs kicking wildly on the bed. Dr. Williams, the psychologist, smiled with satisfaction and gently closed the door. He confidently said to the girl's parents waiting outside, the patient has serious psychological issues. I just used hypnosis to help her deal with the trauma of being bullied in high school. She's completely fine now. After hearing this, the girl's parents nodded repeatedly with satisfaction. Thank you, Dr. Williams. May I ask how you treated her? Dr. Williams was clearly very proud of his expertise. He said confidently, of course. Here's what I did. I designed a graduate summer camp hypnosis scenario, had the patient participate with the classmates who bullied her, and then let her witness those classmates receive their retribution, thereby treating her psychological trauma. Dr. Williams suddenly seemed to remember something. Oh, by the way, patient's family, it's worth mentioning that the patient seemed very attached to a good friend of hers and almost refused to return to reality. So I pretended to be that good friend, entered her consciousness, and told her to live well. Also, the patient's condition is likely dissociative identity disorder. That good friend was probably her second personality. So I helped her eliminate the second personality by implanting in her consciousness the information that her supposed good friend was leaving. This way, this body will only have her single personality from now on. After hearing Dr. Williams' words, the girl's parents were greatly relieved. They said gratefully, "Thank you, Dr. Williams. Summer is so lucky to have met you." Dr. Williams paused. "Wait, what's your daughter's name?" "Summer." "Is something wrong, doctor?" Dr. Williams was stunned. He quickly glanced down at the patient's signature on the consent form in his hand. It clearly read Autumn. He suddenly remembered a mumbled confession from the patient during hypnosis that he had ignored. "I'm getting better and better at pretending to be her, even her parents can't tell the difference." He quickly looked up at the psycho-counseling room. The door was open, and the girl, who had overheard who knows how much of their conversation, gave him a chilling smile.